Your cat knocked over a vase. In the Middle Ages, it might have been put on trial. Here are 15 more absurd facts from that time. Number 1. Eels as currency. In the Middle Ages, eels weren't just food, they were money. In parts of England, especially the Fenlands, rent and taxes could be paid in live eels. Records show a particularly huge case. A land lease was valued at 26,275 eels. The reason was practical. Eels were abundant, easy to store alive in water, and valuable as a protein source during Lent, when meat was forbidden. Monasteries and landlords often demanded eels instead of coins because peasants had better access to rivers than to cash. This made the eel an unusual form of currency, circulating in barrels and baskets rather than in purses. It sounds odd today, but for centuries, eel rent was a normal part of the medieval economy. Number 2. Long-toed shoes, krakos. Fashion in late medieval Europe sometimes went to ridiculous extremes. Nobles wore shoes with toes so long they had to be stuffed with moss, wool, or even whalebone to keep their shape. These were called poulaines or krakos, after Krakow, where they became popular. Some toes stretched over half a meter, making walking difficult. In some cases, men tied the shoe tips to their leggings to stop tripping. Clergy eventually tried to ban them, calling the fashion indecent. Despite that, they remained a symbol of wealth and status for decades. Number 3, animals on trial. Medieval courts occasionally put animals on trial as if they were people. Pigs accused of killing children were sometimes dressed in human clothes and publicly executed. Insects, rats, and even locusts were summoned before church courts for damaging crops. Lawyers were sometimes appointed to defend them. These trials reflected the belief that divine and earthly justice applied to all creatures. While absurd by modern standards, they show how literally medieval society applied its sense of order and responsibility, even to animals. Number 4. Old codgers. The phrase old codger has medieval roots. Royal hunts relied on falcons and hawks, which were carried on wooden frames called codges. These frames were managed by older, trusted men, since handling the king's birds was serious business. Over time, people started referring to the men themselves as codgers. The phrase stuck, eventually losing its bird-handling link and simply meaning an elderly fellow, often with a grumpy edge. Number 5. The professional farter. In 12th century England, there was a man literally named Roland the Farter. His entire job was to entertain King Henry II's court once a year, with a routine of 1 jump, 1 whistle, and 1 fart. For this odd performance, he was rewarded with a house and land in Suffolk. It shows how medieval courts valued spectacle, even if it was crude humor. Number 6. Death by laughter. King Martin of Aragon reportedly died in 1410 after laughing uncontrollably at a joke. While suffering from indigestion, his jester told him a story about a deer that had been caught and prepared in a bizarre way. The king laughed so hard he collapsed and shortly after died. It's one of history's rare cases of death from laughter, an ironic end for a monarch. Number 7. Hallucinogenic bread. In the Middle Ages, poorly stored rye often developed a fungus called ergot. When people baked bread with contaminated grain, it caused strange effects. Burning sensations, convulsions, hallucinations, and even gangrene. The illness was sometimes called Saint Anthony's fire. Some historians suggest that outbreaks of ergot poisoning may have fueled superstitions about witchcraft and visions. To peasants, it seemed like divine punishment, but in reality it was just moldy bread turning into a dangerous hallucinogen. Number 8. Boiled fruit and scurvy. Many medieval people believed raw fruit was unhealthy. To make it safe, they boiled apples, pears, and other fruits before eating. The problem? Boiling destroyed vitamin C. Over time, this practice led to scurvy, bleeding gums, weakness, and sores. Ironically, the attempt to stay healthy by avoiding dangerous raw fruit actually made them sicker. This was a common example of how medieval diet advice could backfire. Number 9. Piggy banks from pig. The word piggy bank comes from a medieval misunderstanding. In England, people stored spare coins in jars made from an orange clay called pig. Over time, the phrase pig jar became piggy jar. By the 18th century, potters began shaping money boxes like pigs, playing on the pun. What began as a reference to clay ended up giving us the iconic pig-shaped money bank still used today. Number 10. Goliards, medieval party clerics. The Goliards were rebellious clerics and students in 12th to 13th century Europe. They mocked the church with satirical poetry, drinking songs, and parodies of hymns. At festivals, they sometimes dressed donkeys in church robes or staged absurd games like biting at a dangling herring. Their verses, preserved in the Camina Burana, mix humor, irreverence, and sharp criticism of authority. Though the church condemned them, they expressed a side of medieval life that was playful and defiant. The Goliards show that even in a deeply religious society, satire and laughter had their place. Number 11. Unicorns and bestiary absurdities. Medieval bestiaries mixed real animals with fantasy and moral lessons. The unicorn was said to be tamed only by resting on a virgin's lap. Beavers supposedly bit off their own testicles to escape hunters, while barnacle geese were thought to grow from barnacles on trees over the sea. These weren't jokes. People accepted them as fact, since few had first-hand experience with exotic animals. Bestiaries combined natural history, folklore, and religious symbolism, shaping how people saw the world. Today, they read like a mix of fairy tale and biology textbook, reflecting the strange medieval balance between faith and observation. Number 12. The Iron Maiden myth. The Iron Maiden, a coffin-like torture device lined with spikes, is one of the most infamous medieval inventions, but it never existed in the Middle Ages. The device was created centuries later in the 18th to 19th century as a shocking exhibit to attract museum crowds. Real medieval torture certainly existed, with devices like the rack or strappado, but no records describe an Iron Maiden in use. The myth survives because it fits the modern view of the Middle Ages as brutal and barbaric. In reality, the Iron Maiden is a fake relic that says more about later imagination than medieval history. Number 13. The Angel on a Pinhead myth. The famous question, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, was never debated in medieval times. Scholars like Thomas Aquinas discussed whether angels occupied physical space, but no one argued about pinheads. The phrase appeared centuries later, used by critics to mock scholastic philosophy as meaningless. In truth, the debates were serious attempts to understand spiritual beings in a physical world, important for medieval theology. The myth stuck because it's funny and easy to repeat, but it unfairly paints medieval thinkers as absurd. It's satire, not fact, about intellectual life in the Middle Ages. Number 14. Medieval wellness fads lizard shampoo. Health advice in the Middle Ages often sounds bizarre today. Manuscripts suggest strange cures and beauty treatments. Boiling lizards for shampoo, rubbing animal fat into the skin, or timing remedies with zodiac signs. Bloodletting was common based on the idea of balancing bodily humors. Some herbal remedies helped, but many treatments were useless or harmful. People believed illness was influenced by stars, diet, and mystical forces. These practices show how much medicine relied on tradition and superstition. To modern readers, medieval wellness trends look more like folklore than science. Early versions of fads, just with stranger ingredients. Number 15. Miniature farm animals. Medieval farm animals were tiny compared to today's breeds. Bulls were about the size of modern calves, and sheep produced only about a kilogram of wool each year. Pigs, chickens, and horses were leaner and less productive, bred more for survival than size. Selective breeding over the centuries transformed them into the large, high-yield animals we know today. Archaeological evidence from bones shows just how small medieval livestock really were. For people then, this was normal, but to us it seems almost comical. Imagining calf-sized cattle reminds us how much farming and food supply changed after the Middle Ages.